Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to the daily Hindu News Analysis. Now before we begin today's discussion, please note that we are providing free access to our live classes and recorded lectures for 3 days. All you have to do is click on the pinned comment and ensure that you get free access to all the lectures on the BYJU'S Exam Prep app. This is available for a period of 3 days, so please ensure that you take the full benefit of this initiative. So with this, let's begin with the discussion of today's The Hindu newspaper. First, let's look at the topics we're going to discuss today. I have chosen 10 important articles from the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. We have 4 articles for a detailed discussion, and we have 6 more articles that are more relevant for your prelims exam. So let's cover these articles one by one. But before we begin, why don't you support us by pressing the like button? Share your comments if you're liking these initiatives, and do share these videos with other aspirants. And also don't forget, directly head to our Telegram channel after the session, because we have a quiz on some of these articles that will help you revise these topics again. So with this, let's begin with the discussion by looking at the first article from page number 4. This article refers to the Katchatheevu Island, which has been a source of dispute between India and Sri Lanka. This particular dispute always triggers a very strong heated debate in Tamil Nadu. This issue has an impact on India-Sri Lanka relations, and hence it's very important to understand this topic in complete detail. First, let's look at the context. Why is the Katchatheevu Island dispute in news? Recently, the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, M.K. Stalin, from the ruling DMK party, has reiterated the demand for retaking Katchatheevu Island from Sri Lanka. Because back in 1974, Katchatheevu Island was given away by India to Sri Lanka as part of a bilateral agreement to settle the maritime boundaries between the two countries. India had given away Katchatheevu Island to Sri Lanka in the interest of keeping peaceful relations and maintaining strong relations with the southern neighboring country. But this has always been opposed in Tamil Nadu by various political parties, as it primarily affects the fishermen in the coastal areas of Tamil Nadu. The rights of fishermen is affected by the transfer of Katchatheevu Island to Sri Lanka, and as a result there has been strong political opposition against this move to give Katchatheevu Island away to Sri Lanka. So that is the reason why the topic is constantly in news, and it always affects India-Sri Lanka relations in many different ways. So today let's understand everything about this dispute. Let's see where the island is located. Let's understand its history and geography as well. And then we'll discuss how the dispute affects India-Sri Lanka relations. Now please look at the map that has been shared over here. You can understand where Katchatheevu Island is located. It's a very small island located near the Park Strait. This here is the Park Strait that differentiates between the Jaffna region of Sri Lanka, the Jaffna Peninsula of Sri Lanka over here, from Rameshwaram of Tamil Nadu in India. You can also see the Gulf of Mannar over here. So both are very important locations, Gulf of Mannar and Park Strait. So over here we have the Katchatheevu Island right along the India-Sri Lanka maritime boundary line. And this island has been a source of dispute since many decades, and the dispute actually dates back to pre-independence days. Now if you look at this island, it's an uninhabited island. You don't have a permanent human settlement on this island. As I told you, it's located near Park Strait in the Gulf of Mannar region. But if you look at the size of the island itself, it's a very small island. It's hardly around 1.6 kilometers in length, and at its broadest point, it's around 300 meters wide. So you can imagine how small this island is. And it's an uninhabited island, and the area is around 285 acres. The only institution or structure that is present on this island is a church. There is a historic church that has been built here in the early 20th century. It's a Catholic church called the St. Anthony's Church. This is the only permanent standing structure on the island. Now, the St. Anthony's Church is of great importance for the Christians, both on the Indian side and as well as on the Sri Lankan side. In the Jaffna Peninsula and also near Rameshwaram, you have a strong Christian community, and for them, the St. Anthony's Church is of great religious significance. In fact, every year, there is an annual fest which is held on the island, and pilgrims from both India and Sri Lanka pay a visit to Katchatheevu to take part in the St. Anthony's Fest. So there is a lot of cultural significance attached to the island, along with its strategic location. Given the importance of such islands in today's geopolitics, definitely such small islands have a lot of strategic value today. But back in 1970s, things were slightly different. And also from the perspective of the fishermen, for the fishermen of both India and Sri Lanka, the island has always been of great importance. Because historically, fishermen from both the sides, they used to dock their boats, they used to rest on the island, they used to dry their nets, and the waters around it has always been a major fishing ground for the fishermen on both the sides. Now, this island is believed to have emerged somewhere around the 14th century due to a volcanic eruption. That's regarding its geography. Now, if you look at its history, its political administrative history, in the early medieval period, that's roughly between 15th to 16th century, it was under the control of the Jaffna kingdom in then Ceylon, which today is Sri Lanka. For a brief period, the Jaffna kingdom in northern parts of Ceylon, that is Sri Lanka, had control over this island. But later, by around 17th century, the control of this island passed on to the Ramnath Zamindari, that's based out of Ramnathpuram, which is around 55 kilometers to the northwest of today's Rameshwaram. So a Zamindari kingdom based out of southern Tamil Nadu gained control over the Katchatheevu Island somewhere around the 17th century. Then later, under British rule, as the Madras Presidency had been established, an agreement was worked out between the then government of Madras, the British government of Madras, and the British administration in Ceylon. This was part of the delimitation of Gulf of Mannar and Pak Strait to demarcate the boundaries between British India and Ceylon, both of which were important British colonies. So in this demarcation that was done, Katchatheevu was made part of the Madras Presidency, as it previously belonged to Ramnath Zamindari system under the Ramnath Kingdom near Rameshwaram. So in 1921, this dispute actually came up as a result of constant tensions between fishermen on both the sides. Now that Katchatheevu had been placed under British India as part of the Madras Presidency, it was leading to conflicts and clashes between fishermen over their fishing rights, and thus it became a source of dispute even prior to independence. Post-independence, India inherited this island. So from 1947 to 1974, the island was seen as part of India's sovereignty. But the dispute had not ended. Please remember that. Because of the controversial nature of its history and control, even though it had been recognized as part of British India, the dispute remained after independence as well. Ceylon gained independence in 1948 and India in 1947. So post-independence, the two countries continued to have the dispute while Katchatheevu remained under India's sovereignty. Later, a survey was conducted. This was again during British rule. A survey was conducted following the 1921 dispute. But as Katchatheevu was marked under Sri Lanka in this survey, it was opposed by a delegation from British India. You can see how the ownership of the island has always been a source of dispute, even during the British colonial rule. To resolve the dispute, a British survey had been conducted, which placed the island under Sri Lanka's control, under Ceylon's control. But this was opposed by a British Indian delegation by citing historical control of the Ramnath kingdom over the Katchatheevu Island. So essentially, we inherited the dispute post-independence, and it wasn't formally settled until 1974. In 1974, the then Indira Gandhi government saw an opportunity to resolve these disputes and to permanently establish a maritime boundary between India and Sri Lanka. This was very essential for the maintenance of friendly relations with our neighbors. So as part of these maritime boundary talks, the then Indira Gandhi government worked out the Indo-Sri Lanka Maritime Boundary Agreement. And under this agreement, India ceded Katchatheevu Island and gave Sri Lanka sovereignty over Katchatheevu Island. Now, in the process of transferring the sovereignty of Katchatheevu to Sri Lanka, the state government, the state assembly, and the people of Tamil Nadu were never consulted. This is the prime contention. The prime opposition in Tamil Nadu is that the state assembly of Tamil Nadu and the people of Tamil Nadu were never consulted when the Indira Gandhi government ceded sovereignty over Katchatheevu to Sri Lanka. Now, if you ask me why India transferred Katchatheevu to Sri Lanka, the answer is very simple. At that point in time, according to the Indira Gandhi government, the island had little strategic value for India. As I told you, it's a very small, brief strip of land. And India believed that we had more to gain by ceding the island to Sri Lanka than by keeping it with us. The primary focus here was to strengthen India-Sri Lanka relations, which had been badly affected because of the ethnic conflict that had emerged in Sri Lanka. You should look at the broader picture of what was happening in India-Sri Lanka relations. By 1974, the Sinhala Buddhist majority government in Sri Lanka had systematically discriminated and oppressed the Tamil minorities in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka had even become a geopolitical threat because in 1971, when India was liberating Bangladesh and fighting a war with Pakistan, Sri Lanka, instead of being neutral, had sided with Pakistan and had given direct support during the war. It had allowed Pakistani ships, vessels and aircraft to refuel when reinforcements were being sent from West Pakistan to East Pakistan. When India and US became hostile to each other as a result of the liberation of Bangladesh war, it allowed US to establish a strong foothold in Sri Lanka and even set up a radio station against India's wishes, which the Indira Gandhi government saw as a security threat. So the Indira Gandhi government had a strong motivation to repair the relationship and ensure that Sri Lanka remains a friend of India instead of being a hostile neighbor of India. So in the interest of deepening the relations and ironing out the differences, India believed that, if you look at the cost-benefit ratio, that giving away a small piece of island with no strategic value might serve a larger purpose of building stronger relations, closer relations with Sri Lanka, with possible impact on the ethnic issue of Sri Lanka as well. But this decision to transfer Katchatheevu has always been opposed and contested in Tamil Nadu. See, under this agreement, under the 1974 agreement through which sovereignty was ceded, it was agreed that Indian fishermen would still have access to Katchatheevu. This was also one reason why India agreed to cede Katchatheevu to Sri Lanka. Only Sri Lanka would get sovereignty, but Tamil Nadu fishermen would still have access to it, along with Sri Lankan fishermen. But the terms of the access was not specified. What kind of access would be given was not clearly spelled out in the agreement, and this gave rise to a different interpretation on both the sides. Sri Lanka started interpreting this agreement that Indian fishermen will only have limited access, will have only limited rights to Katchatheevu. Sri Lanka started restricting the access of Indian fishermen and limited this only to resting, that is docking their fishing boats, to dry the nets, and to visit the St. Anthony's Church and the fest without the need for a Sri Lankan visa. Essentially, easy access was given, but limited access was given. Fishing rights, as you can see, was restricted by Sri Lanka, because the 1974 agreement clearly did not spell out what kind of access and rights would be given to the fishermen on both the sides. So Sri Lanka started interpreting this as limited access to Indian fishermen with limited rights, and it only allowed Indian fishermen to rest, dock their boats, dry their nets, and visit the church and the fest, and participate in the cultural fest. But Sri Lanka denied fishing rights, which affected the livelihood of fishermen on the Indian side. By then, the concept of exclusive economic zone was being put in place as part of delineating maritime boundaries. India-Sri Lanka worked out another set of maritime boundary agreement to determine fishing rights in 1976. And in accordance with international law, we settled that the respective countries will have fishing rights only in their respective EEZ or in their respective exclusive economic zones. This was in line with developments in international law, which was later codified in 1980s as the UN clause or the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. If you know what UN clause deals with, you would understand what I'm talking about. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea delineates maritime boundaries into territorial waters, contiguous zone, exclusive economic zone, etc. According to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, only the coastal state will have exclusive rights on all the resources present within its exclusive economic zone. Meaning all resources present in India's EEZ is the sole property of India. Be it fisheries, be it hydrocarbons or any precious minerals, whatever resources are present in India's EEZ, it belongs to India. Foreign countries, foreign vessels cannot poach them. Similarly, whatever resources are present in Sri Lanka's EEZ belongs to Sri Lanka, and Indian fishermen cannot poach fishes from Sri Lanka's EEZ. So these boundaries were demarcated by 1976 and later gained even international recognition as UN clause came into being. But the degree of uncertainty has always remained. Since Indian fishermen have traditionally accessed Katchatheevu for fishing, it's a rich fishing ground, the fishermen would tend to cross over the maritime boundary line, enter Sri Lankan waters into Sri Lanka's EEZ, and they continued fishing. This problem became aggravated, particularly after the breakout of civil war in Sri Lanka. As Tamil militant outfits such as LTTE were set up in the Jaffna region, these militant groups largely controlled the northern parts of Sri Lanka, and they found a safe haven in Tamil Nadu. As a civil war broke out, the Tamil militants from northern Sri Lanka would often hide in Tamil Nadu. They got a lot of support as well, local support in Tamil Nadu. So as these areas were largely controlled by the LTTE, Sri Lanka had limited control over Katchatheevu, and Sri Lanka was mainly focused on tackling the LTTE. So this continued to allow Tamil Nadu fishermen to have access to Katchatheevu. As some of the fishermen would often work with LTTE, right? The Indian fishermen would support LTTE as they sympathized with Tamils in Sri Lanka. And as LTTE controlled most of the areas, it would allow Tamil Nadu fishermen to have access to Katchatheevu and continue fishing around Katchatheevu Island. Throughout the civil war, the Sri Lankan Navy, when it was focused on tackling LTTE and the threat of militancy, it would often target the fishermen as well, because many times fishing boats would be used by LTTE to run away from Sri Lanka and hide in India. So during this period from 1983 to 2009, there were few incidents where Indian fishing boats were targeted by the Sri Lankan Navy and the Sri Lankan Coast Guard. As they would presume these boats to be used by LTTE, they would often target them. So they would end up shooting at Indian fishermen, injuring or killing Indian fishermen, and in many cases they would detain Indian fishermen as well, arrest them and torture them in custody, sometimes killing them in custody as well. This was also a result of the tensions between India and Sri Lanka during the civil war. As Sri Lanka blamed India for the crisis, Sri Lanka alleged that India was supporting LTTE. So as a result of this hostility between India and Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan Navy and Coast Guard, they became even more aggressive against Indian fishing boats and Indian fishermen. So whenever Indian fishermen were shot or injured or arrested or killed, it would become a major diplomatic issue, as it would lead to a huge response in Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu, the political parties, be it DMK, AIDMK, they would vigorously protest against the arrest of Indian fishermen or the killing of Indian fishermen. and it would become a major political issue in Tamil Nadu, thus putting a lot of pressure on the central government. This issue has aggravated after 2009. Since the civil war came to an end, Sri Lanka has gained full control over the northern territories as well, including Katchatheevu Island. Since 2009, the Sri Lankan Navy and Coast Guard, they have a greater control over the Katchatheevu Island, and they are focused on the strategic aspect of the island. They have strengthened their defenses, and every now and then they disrupt Indian boats and target Indian fishermen. See, please understand that it's the Indian fishermen who are committing the first mistake. By crossing over into Sri Lankan waters, it's a breach of the bilateral agreement, it's a breach of international law as well. If you ask me why Indian fishermen still cross over and why do they try to fish in Sri Lankan waters, the answer is very simple. Tamil Nadu fishermen have used exploitative fishing methods such as bottom trawling. The Tamil Nadu state government has given a lot of subsidies to fishermen, which allows many fishermen to easily procure these mechanized boats or trawlers, which are quite expensive. Because of the state support, many fishermen can afford these mechanized boats, and they use mechanized boats to carry out a exploitative, prohibited form of fishing known as bottom trawling. So on the Indian side, that is in Indian waters, Tamil Nadu fishermen have largely exhausted the fishing resources. So due to the shortage of fish on the Indian side, the Indian fishermen, as a result of desperation, as a result of the need for their livelihood, they cross over the boundary line, right? In waters, in open seas, you can't identify where exactly is the boundary line. There are no physical markers. Unless you're using a GPS guided satellite map, right? Fishing boats will not exactly know where they are, whether they are in Indian waters or Sri Lankan waters. So quite frequently, Tamil Nadu fishermen cross over to the other side, and since fishing resources are depleted on the Indian side, they target the fishing grounds in Sri Lanka, that's around Katchatheevu. This often leads to clashes between Indian fishermen and Sri Lankan fishermen. Sri Lankan Navy and Coast Guard, they intercept the Indian boats. As I told you, they open fire sometimes, they arrest the fishermen as well. And even recently, in the last 2 years itself, we have had quite a few incidents where Indian fishermen have been killed or arrested. These incidents become a major standoff. It becomes a standoff point between India and Sri Lanka because it leads to a political uproar in Tamil Nadu. The major political parties, be it DMK or AIDMK, they have always opposed the ceding of Indian sovereignty over Katchatheevu to Sri Lanka. Their argument is that when Katchatheevu was gifted away to Sri Lanka, there was no state government and state assembly in Tamil Nadu because it was a period of emergency. Then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had imposed a national emergency by 1975, and the state governments and assemblies had been dismissed. So the argument from the Tamil Nadu government and the major political parties is that Katchatheevu was transferred to Sri Lanka without consulting the state assembly, without consulting the state government. So Tamil Nadu has strongly opposed the transfer of the island and keeps reiterating that we should reclaim this island. Recently, the issue has gained more importance because M.K. Stalin, the current chief minister, has made many references and has even put political pressure on the Modi government, and even Prime Minister Modi has personally spoken about this, saying that Katchatheevu was gifted away by India. And from Tamil Nadu, there is a strong demand to take the island back. Now, this is where the legal questions come up, the legal and constitutional questions. In fact, former Chief Minister Jayalalitha had approached the Supreme Court over this matter in 2008, calling for a nullification of these maritime boundary agreements that India had signed with Sri Lanka in 74 and 76. But of course, the Supreme Court did not pass any direct orders here. It did not step into this domain because any revocation or nullification of these agreements would impact India-Sri Lanka relations. Sri Lanka obviously will not accept that. And as the government of India has argued in front of the Supreme Court, the only way you can take back the island is by fighting a war. That's the last thing we want with a friendly country, because today Sri Lanka is largely a friendly country. So India wants to rely on peaceful talks and negotiations to resolve the dispute, either by talking to Sri Lanka or by pacifying the political parties in Tamil Nadu. But of course, the responsibility is on the Indian side to prevent Indian fishermen from crossing over illegally into Sri Lankan waters. That is prohibited under international law. And also breaking these historical agreements would harm India's image, India's reputation. We have always upheld international rules. To break down these rules-based order would be contradictory to India's foreign policy. On one hand, we accuse China of breaking international rules, threatening the sovereignty of others. But to revive such claims and to get aggressive against Sri Lanka would be uncalled for. That's why at least the government of India has been quite balanced on this issue. It has never said that we'll reclaim or take back the island. Right? The Modi government has criticized the previous policy. That's a political issue altogether. Let's not get into that. But the government of India has never said we are going to reclaim the island, because that would be extremely controversial, which could affect India-Sri Lanka relations. But there is a strong demand from Tamil Nadu to pursue a dialogue or pursue some legal constitutional changes through which Katchatheevu can be claimed back. Now this brings us to the legality of this transfer. Was the transfer of Katchatheevu constitutional? So here we have a case that we can refer to, the Berubari Union case of 1960. Now what does the Indian Constitution say about transfer of territory? I'm sure you guys would have read Article 1 of the Indian Constitution that defines India, that is Bharat. Under Article 1, India can expand its territory by acquiring foreign territories. This is permitted. But it does not explicitly say anything about ceding Indian territory to another country. Article 1, which talks about the boundaries of India, does allow the Indian Parliament to expand Indian territory through acquiring foreign territories. So expansion of the territory is allowed, but there is nothing explicitly said about ceding Indian territory to another country. Because ceding Indian territory is out of the question. In Berubari Union case, it's related to the transfer of a place called Berubari in West Bengal. Back then, the Radcliffe Line, which marked the boundaries between India and Pakistan, had placed Berubari on the Indian side, that is in West Bengal. But Pakistan also claimed Berubari, or historical claims. And these were small enclaves of each other, of India, Pakistan, that were located on both the sides. So the then Nehru government worked out a boundary agreement. It's called the Nehru-Noon Agreement of 1958, through which we decided to divide Berubari Union between India and Pakistan. So half of Berubari Union came under West Bengal and the other half went to East Pakistan. This cession of Indian territory, the ceding of part of Berubari Union to Pakistan, was legally challenged in the Berubari Union case. Here the main question was, does the Indian government and the parliament, do they have the legal constitutional powers to cede Indian territory? That is the big question. The government argued that the preamble of the constitution has given powers to the government and the parliament to make these changes. But however, the Supreme Court ruled that the parliament does not have these powers to cede Indian territory under Article 1 and Article 3. Article 3 deals with changing the boundaries of a state. It's a power that has been vested with the Indian Parliament. The Supreme Court ruled in Berubari Union case that if Indian territory has to be ceded, it can be done only through a constitutional amendment under Article 368. The government on its own, through bilateral treaties and agreements, and even the parliament, they don't have the direct powers to cede Indian territory. Is that clear? It's very clear that as per Article 3 and Article 1, it requires a constitutional change, a constitutional amendment. Or else, the union does not have the power to transfer or cede Indian territory to another country. That's why recently when we resolved the enclave issue with Bangladesh in 2014, when the land boundary agreement was signed between India and Bangladesh to exchange the enclaves, it required a constitutional amendment. India enacted the 100th Constitutional Amendment Act that provided for ceding of few Indian territories to Bangladesh to settle the land boundary issue. So coming back to the ceding of Katchatheevu, according to the Berubari Union case and various other observations of the Supreme Court, the government of India and the parliament cannot directly transfer the territory to another country on their own and any such transfer requires a constitutional amendment. So in the case of Katchatheevu transfer, no such constitutional amendment was done, thereby raising questions over its legality and constitutionality. But the Supreme Court has not stepped in because that would harm India-Sri Lanka relations, could increase tensions as well, and push the countries towards the brink of conflict. So this remains a legacy issue, a very controversial issue as well. That's why I told you, let's not get into the political aspect of it, but I've given you both sides of the argument. Why India transferred the island, what was the need at that point in time, why it is opposed in Tamil Nadu. Is that clear? So this remains a standing issue with no solution in sight, and it keeps affecting fishermen, the Tamil Nadu fishermen, as they tend to illegally cross over into Sri Lankan waters. So as of now, the solution is that India, Sri Lanka have to work out an arrangement to prevent the crossover of Indian fishermen. So first of all, we have to prohibit bottom trawling, prevent Indian ships from crossing over. The reason why fishermen are crossing over is because we have overexploited our fishing resources. We can't seem to be breaking international rules and work out a settlement with Sri Lanka which protects some basic rights of the Tamil Nadu fishermen while protecting Sri Lanka's rights over its exclusive economic zone. So that is something India Sri Lanka have to work out in the coming days. So it's a very, very important topic. Since there is a lot of political controversy around it, UPSC can always ask a mains question or even a basic prelims question on the Katchatheevu Island. Now let's move on to the next article. On page number 6, we have a column related to India-Japan relations. In this column, the writers are talking about tech diplomacy between India and Japan. India and Japan are very close partners in the high-tech domain, and they are collaborating in critical emerging technologies. So here the writers are mainly focused upon the India-Japan collaboration in the field of semiconductors. Just last month, in July 2023, India and Japan have signed an agreement through which the two countries will collaborate. Government institutions, universities, and even their private sector, they will collaborate in the semiconductor domain to create resilient supply chains for this critical technology. As you know, semiconductors are crucial for the electronics industry. Semiconductors have a lot of strategic value as well, because semiconductors are the backbone of your economy and even your national security. Because semiconductors, they find application in defense, in aerospace, in many other critical technologies that are vital for the country's national security. Today, the major exporters of semiconductor chips are China, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, and the United States. These are some of the top producers of semiconductor chips. They have the resources, the technology to not just design the semiconductor chips, but to fabricate them, to produce and fabricate semiconductor chips and export this around the world. So today's electronics industry is largely dependent on these countries, with Taiwan, China, Japan, and South Korea controlling a large part of the global market. Now, since semiconductors have a strategic value attached to them because of their economic and security importance, the geopolitical tensions today is reflected in the semiconductor world. In fact, it has triggered a chip war between these major producers. As you know, US and China have deep-rooted tensions between them in the Indo-Pacific. China and Japan have several standing boundary disputes as well in the East China Sea. And these historical rivals, they have an active standoff going on, thus creating an imbalance in the region. So these tensions between US and China and Japan, it affects the global supply chains as well. It has an economic impact as well. Currently, these major powers are competing for dominance in the semiconductor industry, especially after recent supply shocks caused by COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war. The Western countries led by US, European countries and Japan, they are trying to reduce their dependency on Chinese-dominated supply chains. In such critical areas like semiconductor fabrication production, US, European countries and Japan, they want to create global resilient supply chains that are not dependent on China. Because China is known to leverage its economic dominance and turn that into a geopolitical advantage. So as a result, US, Japan and European countries, they're all collaborating together. And now India is also joining them through such bilateral agreements. Recently, we have entered into this partnership with Japan to focus on semiconductor collaboration, to cooperate with each other, between each other's institutions, to focus on semiconductor design, to focus on manufacturing and production and fabrication, and to promote research and innovation in the semiconductor domain. The idea is to create resilience in this key sector by building government-to-government relations and industry-to-industry collaborations. So this new deal that India and Japan have worked out, it focuses on exchange of technology. Transfer of technology is a part of this agreement. It will allow Indian institutions, scientific research institutions, to collaborate with Japanese institutions. It will bring our private companies, startups together, and it will leverage the mutual strength, the complementary strengths of India and Japan. See, Japan is an advanced economy. It has always been a global leader in the semiconductor industry. It competes with China, Taiwan and South Korea. India also is a massive market for semiconductors because of our large IT sector. The growing demand for electronics, devices and gadgets in India makes India one of the world's biggest semiconductor markets. Currently, India's biggest weakness is that we are not strong enough in semiconductor fabrication. We don't have enough indigenous production. We largely rely on imports, and thus creating an import dependency which makes us vulnerable to the dominance of China as well. So India also wants to move away from its dependency on China, and it's only natural for India to seek collaboration with like-minded partners such as Japan and the United States. In fact, our Make in India initiative that focuses on indigenization and self-reliance in the technology domain, it aligns with Japan's Society 5.0 initiative, which is also focused on building resilience and promoting innovation within the Japanese economy. So these policies of the Indian government and the Japanese government, they complement each other. Our Make in India program complements Society 5.0 initiative of Japan that is focused on creating a domestic economy to build resilience and to reduce import dependency. So India has worked out a similar deal with the US as well. So that is what explains the need for such collaboration in such a key domain. Since China dominates this field and many countries have become dependent on China, these global disruptions in supply chains and the geopolitical tensions, they do affect countries like India. The COVID-19 pandemic was a learning lesson, right? It showed to what degree China controls the global economy through its dominance over supply chains. Then came the Russia-Ukraine war, right? How supply chains can get disrupted because of such conflicts and wars. And it highlighted how geopolitical tensions can affect other third countries which are not even involved in the conflict. So essentially, the tensions between US and Russia concerning the Ukraine war and the Western sanctions on Russia has affected the rest of the world. It has disrupted global supply chains. Similarly, tensions between US and China. Western countries are trying to reduce their dependency on China, and this is also disrupting global supply chains. So a country like India, which is getting caught in between, would like to create supply chain resiliency by working with like-minded countries. So India has collaborated in this key semiconductor domain with Japan and the United States, as our policies complement each other. All three countries, along with Australia, they are part of the Quad grouping or the quadrilateral, and they want to build supply chain resiliency with regard to semiconductors. Japan and US they are already collaborating through the Fab 4 alliance, to reduce dependency on China. The US has enacted a legislation in this regard as well, which we discussed in a recent session. The Chips and Science Act of 2022, brought out by the US. It places restrictions on export of strategic technologies and products that are used by semiconductor industries in China. Is that clear? Such critical exports are restricted through American law. And at the start of the year, Japan and Netherlands worked with US to restrict critical exports to China, through which China is dominating the semiconductor market. Essentially, you're seeing a division emerging between Western countries and China, and you're seeing a geopolitical economic conflict breaking out over the semiconductor industry. So given the nature of India-China tensions, it only makes sense for India to align with such Western countries, and that explains the recent initiative to work out a deal with Japan to collaborate in the semiconductor domain. Even with the United States, we have set up the ICET initiative, the Initiative for Critical Emerging Technologies, under which India and US are also collaborating in the semiconductor domain. In fact, major US chip companies are looking to set up manufacturing plants in India. In Gujarat, Micron Technologies, which is one of the world's largest chip manufacturers, is looking to set up a semiconductor fabrication unit. So in this regard, the India-Japan partnership, it will go a long way in reshaping the global supply chains. And India, Japan, and US, they can all collaborate together to share technology and strengthen India's role in semiconductor fabrication, packaging, and manufacturing. Is that clear? So that is the importance of this agreement. And it's not just an economic deal, it has geopolitical consequences as well. So this completes my detailed discussion of the second column. Now let's take a look at a couple of important editorials on page number 6. The topics are pretty small, but you should be aware of these developments. There's not much to discuss, but I would like to shed light on these topics that are highlighted by the two editorials on page number 6. The first editorial deals with the issue of blasphemy and the controversial blasphemy laws in Pakistan. So to understand the article, first you should know what is blasphemy. What are these laws in Pakistan and why are these laws in news? Why is this issue in news in Pakistan? And how does this concern India? The dictionary meaning of blasphemy, it essentially means any disrespect, any contempt or insult towards a particular religion or towards someone's God, towards someone's religious belief. Now let's say if a person were to pass an insulting comment against the God of another religion or against another faith, against a sacred religious text, right? Such acts could be punishable if a country recognizes blasphemy. If there are laws dealing with blasphemy, through this, any such blasphemous act can be punished. Now, such laws are outdated in a modern democracy. In a modern democracy, it's built on the pillar of right to free speech and expression, where you have the right to criticize faith as well, or critically question belief and faith as well. But in closed societies like Pakistan, for example, laws such as blasphemy laws prevail to this day, and these laws are actually of colonial origin. It was the British who believed in blasphemy laws, who introduced blasphemy laws with penal punishments, strict punishments for those who are insulting another's faith or questioning another's faith or showing contempt, disregard towards the religious sentiments of another community. These laws have prevailed in Pakistan since Pakistan was established. If you look at the very origin of Pakistan, right, the Muslim League, the kind of support they got from the British, the whole idea was based on communal lines. The very state of Pakistan was created on communal lines that marked a communal partition of the Indian subcontinent. Following that, the Pakistani state has continued to misuse religion. Again, the problem is not with any religion here. Problem is with the manner in which Pakistani state has misused religion for its narrow interests. Be it the political parties in Pakistan or the deep state of Pakistan, that is the Pakistani army and the ISI, which is Pakistan's intelligence agency. These power actors in Pakistan, they have deliberately misused religion. They have promoted extremist tendencies, which has significantly hurt religious minorities in the country. From the very beginning, Pakistan's idea, the very idea of the nation, was rooted in communal extremism. And this has been actively promoted by the Pakistani state for its narrow interests, to hold power, to retain its control, and for geopolitical advantages. The Pakistani government, Pakistani army, the ISI, they have deliberately promoted extremist ideas, and they even declared that only one brand of Islam is a state religion. This is embedded in Pakistan's constitution. It became a theocratic state, adopted one strand of Islam while targeting all other interpretations of Islam. So religious minorities like Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Sikhs, and even Muslims, they've all been targeted in Pakistan. For example, Sunnis who don't believe in the rigid interpretation of Islam of Pakistani state, right? They could be targeted, they could be persecuted. Even Shias, Hazaras, Ahmadiyas. So various minority communities within Islam and as well as other religious minorities, they've often been targeted, discriminated in Pakistan, and have even faced large-scale violence. And Pakistan has controversially retained these blasphemy laws, which is of British origin, that provides for punishment, including death penalty, for causing any contempt to faith, to religion. Recently, based on these allegations of blasphemy, there has been targeted violence against Christians in the country. The Christian minorities and churches have been targeted by radical extremists. So this highlights the deep sectarian divide in Pakistan and how the Pakistani state has misused religion for its narrow political, geopolitical interests. So the editorial is urging the Pakistani state to put an end to such acts of extremism. That should begin with the removal of these blasphemy laws, which has no place in modern democracies today. But of course, Pakistan is no democracy, it's no real democracy, that's another argument altogether. But it shows how Pakistan has used religious extremism to protect the state, protect its political, geopolitical interests, and how it has misused religion for that purpose, thus causing a deep sectarian divide in the country. Now this of course has great implications for India, because everything that has to do with Pakistan, be it the stability of the country, its obsession with Kashmir, its sponsorship of terrorism against India, is all connected to the extremist form of religion that the state has supported. Again, the problem itself is not with religion, it's the state agencies, the political parties, right, the deep state, how they have misused religion, given it wrong interpretations for promoting extremist tendencies to retain their political control. This is what allows Pakistani state actors to hold their control over power and achieve their geopolitical goals, which is to target countries like India and others. So it's very important to pay attention to the internal crisis in Pakistan and the sectarian divide within the country. So that's why the article is important, because it sheds light on the blasphemy laws of the country and how religious minorities have been targeted in Pakistan. Now moving on to the next editorial. It deals with LK99, a new material which was announced by a South Korean research team. If you guys remember, we had a detailed discussion on this topic a few days back. I discussed that a South Korean research team had claimed that they had developed a material. It is a copper-based compound. They had developed a copper-based material which was claimed to have superconductivity at ambient room temperatures and room pressure conditions. Now this was seen as a revolutionary breakthrough if it were true. If it were to be true, if it were to be peer verified, and if it was conclusively established by research teams across the world, then this would have clearly been the biggest scientific breakthrough of the century. Because superconductivity is a revolutionary domain, right? Superconductivity is a state where a material displays zero electric resistance for the flow of electricity through it. These unique properties, they are currently seen only under controlled conditions, where you have extremely low temperatures, where you create certain temperature pressure conditions. Only then superconductivity becomes a reality in various materials. But superconductivity at room temperature is what scientists are looking for to have real world applications. Because superconductivity can transform electronics. It can transform the way in which devices are built. It can transform the entire semiconductor industry. Imagine a material with zero electrical resistance. Imagine how you can reduce transmission loss, how effectively electrons can be moved through a material, and this will revolutionize the semiconductor and electronics industry. So there is a hunt for such a material which can be a superconductor at normal room temperatures. Right now, superconductivity can be achieved only in a lab, only under controlled temperature pressure conditions where extremely low temperatures are maintained. So superconductivity in reality, in the real world, is not possible because such materials are not available. So this announcement by a South Korean research team took the scientific community by surprise. It was seen as a very big announcement that took the internet by surprise as well, and the whole research went viral on the internet. But immediately research teams around the world, they got to work. In India as well, several research institutions, they tried to verify this theory. So around the world, the scientific community collaborated to peer review and verify the claims made by the South Korean research team. And as it turns out, the claims have been disproven. The claim has been disproved through peer review. So this puts an end to the massive interest created in this material called LK99. The peer review around the world has proven that it does not show superconductivity at room temperature. It was just a chance finding by the South Korean team. It's not a valid research. It has been disproved. Now this highlights the potential of the internet and the potential of an interconnected world and how it could help in scientific research. Internet-based collaboration between research teams helps in transfer of data, transfer of research information in real time, and it helps in proving or disproving theories in almost real time, or at least in few hours or few days, thus helping tackle fake news or theories, fake theories, or any bad actors who are deliberately spreading misinformation, right? So in the world of science and technology, evidence-based verification is very important. Science is all about empirical evidence, evidence which can be justified, which is provable in every place, at every given point in time, right? So peer review is something that's critical as far as scientific research and innovation is concerned, and any research, any discovery will not stand unless and until it has been peer reviewed and verified by the scientific community around the world. Now, thanks to the internet, thanks to how the global community collaborates today, very quickly these claims have been disproven. It has put to rest all the sensation surrounding material LK99. It shows that we are nowhere close to achieving superconductivity at room temperatures. Is that clear? It is thought to be impossible to achieve. So this announcement was a huge breakthrough. It was seen as a breakthrough, but it has been very quickly disproven thanks to the peer reviews done around the world. So that's an update on material LK99 that generated a sensation around the world in the scientific community. So this completes my detailed discussion of all the big articles in today's newspaper. Now let's head towards the prelims section. We have 6 small articles. We'll quickly go through them one by one. On the front page, on page number 1, the Prime Minister, he has called upon the global community to work together and use the digital health infrastructure for the public good. He has called upon the WHO, the World Health Organization, he's called upon G20 countries and the healthcare sector around the world. He has urged them to use the digital health infrastructure for the public good. This statement was made by the Prime Minister while addressing the G20 health ministers. As you know, India is holding the G20 presidency, and in the run-up to G20 summit, which will happen next month, India has been organizing several ministerial meetings. So currently, G20 health ministers meeting is being held in Gujarat, and the WHO is a key part of this initiative. In fact, the WHO is holding its first ever summit on traditional medicine as well, along with the G20 Health Ministers Conference. So during this Health Ministers meeting of G20 countries, Prime Minister Modi made this statement urging all the countries, the WHO and the healthcare sector around the world to leverage the digital health infrastructure and use it for public good. All right? So in this context, the Prime Minister mentioned a couple of important initiatives. He has mentioned the Global Initiative on Digital Health. He has also mentioned the WHO Global Center for Traditional Medicine. These two are very, very important topics for your prelims. Let's understand what is the Global Initiative on Digital Health. Who has launched the initiative? This initiative has been launched by India as part of its G20 presidency, along with the World Health Organization. It's an Indian initiative launched through G20 with the support of WHO. The focus of this initiative is to create a global digital health infrastructure, to pool the digital resources of all the countries in the healthcare sector. For example, under Ayushman Bharat scheme, which is the world's largest health insurance scheme, India has created a digital health infrastructure. There is a separate digital component, Ayushman Bharat Digital, through which healthcare records are being digitized. Every patient is being assigned a unique digital ID. All your health data, your diagnosis reports, lab reports, test results, your prescriptions, everything is being digitized as part of the digitization of the healthcare industry. So public sector institutions, government hospitals, private hospitals are all part of this digitization effort. Similarly, other countries as well would have their own digital healthcare initiatives. And digital healthcare is the future, not just to improve service delivery and bring down the cost of healthcare, but also to look out for future threats, to look out for future epidemics and pandemics, and essentially to prevent another COVID-19. Through digitization of healthcare, you can improve surveillance, you can improve the watch against infectious diseases, you can improve the sharing of data with other countries. One of the biggest criticisms against China was the lack of transparency and lack of sharing of data with regard to COVID-19, which led to the spread of the disease and essentially turned into a pandemic later. Even WHO was heavily criticized for its failure to warn other countries adequately. So to address these deficiencies in our healthcare system, India has launched this initiative called the Global Initiative on Digital Health with WHO, and it's part of the G20 framework. It essentially integrates the digital health infrastructure of the G20 countries, and crucial interim medical countermeasures are being implemented so that a global digital platform can be created for the healthcare sector that will allow for sharing of health-related data. Of course, user data will not be compromised. Each patient's data will be protected as part of data privacy and data security. But healthcare information, keeping track of communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases, tracking the emerging trends in the healthcare sector, keeping a check and surveillance on epidemics and pandemics, such data will be shared through digital health infrastructure of these countries. And it's an initiative that's being backed by the World Health Organization. The other big initiative to be announced by India and WHO is that a WHO Global Center is coming up for traditional medicine, which will be set up at Jamnagar in Gujarat. WHO for the first time is hosting a summit on traditional medicine. That is your alternate forms of medicine, such as Ayush. Generally, WHO has focused only on allopathic medicine, right? Which is largely rooted in Western science. But there are many traditional healthcare systems like Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha, Yoga, homeopathy. You have Chinese traditional medicine as well, right? Various indigenous tribal communities, through their traditional knowledge, will have their own expertise in the field of alternate healthcare. Of course, the scientific validity of this is questionable, but it finds wide acceptance and there is some science backing few forms of traditional medicine as well. India in particular gives a lot of support for Ayush forms of medicine. We have a dedicated ministry today for Ayush stream of alternate medicine. It has wide acceptance in India and in many other parts of the world as well. So WHO also has started paying attention to alternate traditional medicine, and the first global summit of the WHO on traditional medicine is being held in Gujarat, along with the G20 health ministers meeting. So during this, the WHO and India have announced that a global center for traditional medicine research will be set up at Jamnagar in Gujarat. This WHO center, it will be a global center focusing on alternate traditional medicine, promoting research, promoting sharing of knowledge, right? So that is what you have to note down. It will collaborate traditional knowledge from around the world. It will focus on integrating local heritage, local knowledge with the healthcare systems and how traditional medicinal knowledge can be applied in healthcare. Next, we have an article on page number 8 that refers to parliamentary privilege. It refers to the topic of parliamentary privilege, which has been in news. Because recently, an opposition MP, Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary, he was dismissed from the House based on these privilege charges that were brought up against him. Now, other MPs are supporting the reinstatement of Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary because he is also the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. He heads the PAC, or the Public Accounts Committee, which is one of the most important parliamentary standing committees. I hope you know that if an MP has been dismissed from the House, even on charges of privilege, if let's say the MP has breached the privilege of other MPs and he has been dismissed from the House, he or she, they cannot participate in any of the panel meetings. The rules of the parliament is that a suspended member, a MP who has been suspended from the House on the account of breach of privilege, they cannot participate in any parliamentary standing committee meetings. So Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary, being the head of the PAC, or the Public Accounts Committee, which is one of the most important committees, won't be able to participate in these meetings unless and until he is restored and his suspension is revoked. So this brings us to the topic of privilege motion and the Committee on Privileges. What is this Committee on Privileges in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha? Or what do you mean by a privilege motion? That is something you should understand. See, under the parliamentary rules, to protect the right of free speech and expression of our elected MPs, to allow them to freely discuss and debate and express their opinion in the parliament, they are provided with a basic right known as privilege. All the MPs enjoy this privilege, which means what they say in the parliament as an MP, for that they are not liable in a court. They can't be sued. They can't be prosecuted in a court of law, for what an MP has said on the floor of the House. No other act which threatens the right of free speech and expression of the parliament, right, can be entertained. And this is what you mean by parliamentary privilege. It's the MPs who have the privilege to speak what they want and debate and discuss the issues that they want. Of course, there is no codified list as to what exactly is parliamentary privilege. There's no written law or there's no written code which determines or describes what exactly is parliamentary privilege. Under the existing parliamentary rules, under the rules and business of conduct of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, it's been identified that MPs have a right of free speech and expression. They are not liable for court proceedings for what they say in the parliament. So any act even by the press, by the public, by the courts, or by other MPs, which affects the privilege of the MP in the House, is seen as a breach of parliamentary privilege. In such cases, the MPs can push for a privilege motion, which will be taken up by the Committee on Privileges. In the Rajya Sabha, the chairman, that is the Vice President of India, would have set up a Committee on Privileges that consists of 10 members along with a chairman. The Rajya Sabha chairman, that is essentially the Vice President of India, would have constituted a Committee on Privileges comprising of 10 MPs from the Rajya Sabha with a chairman appointed to deal with such privilege proceedings. Similarly, in Lok Sabha, the Speaker has the essential power to make the decisions regarding privilege. And Lok Sabha Speaker would have also set up a Committee on Privilege to deal with privilege motion. 10 MPs from Lok Sabha would be nominated with a chairperson to decide on these charges of breach of privilege. So if an MP feels that their right to speak, their right to express their opinion has been disrupted, or if someone has shown contempt towards it, if someone has disrupted that right, then MPs can move a privilege motion that leads to a detailed inquiry. The committee can call the member, it can ask for documents, it can see whether the accused have they breached parliamentary privilege, and accordingly they can be punished as well by the committee. Is that clear? If other MPs have breached the privilege of few MPs, those MPs can be suspended from the House for the duration of a session or for a duration of few sessions. They can be suspended. So this is what you mean by privilege, and there is a committee in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha to deal with privilege motion. Next, on page number 10 and 12, we have a couple of articles that refer to the upcoming BRICS summit. It's just an update I'm giving you. Please make a note of this. We will have a detailed discussion on the topic in the coming days. The 15th BRICS summit is all set to take place at Johannesburg in South Africa. South Africa will be hosting this year's BRICS summit, and it's one of the most important BRICS summit. The reason is Prime Minister Modi will be participating. PM Modi has confirmed his participation, and Chinese leader Xi Jinping will also be attending the BRICS summit along with a bilateral visit to South Africa. The visit is important for several reasons. One, of course, because it will be a platform for India-China interaction. Given the state of tensions and border disputes, the interaction between PM Modi and Xi Jinping will be closely watched. Is that clear? The other big development is Russia and whether Putin would participate. Because South Africa is a member of the International Criminal Court. It has signed and ratified the Rome Statute, which provides for war crimes, crimes against humanity. And Russian President Putin has been charged by the International Criminal Court for committing war crimes in Ukraine. So South Africa, as a member country of the Rome Statute, as a member of International Criminal Court, will be mandated, it will be legally bound by international rules to arrest Putin despite his diplomatic immunity. So most likely Putin will not be visiting, right? He will not physically attend the summit. He might virtually take part in the summit. So given the tensions between Western countries and Russia, between US and China, between India and China, the BRICS summit acquires a lot of significance. BRICS grouping has a lot of achievements to its credit, right? We will discuss all about the BRICS grouping in the coming days. In the next week, once the summit is underway, once the summit concludes by August 24th, we will have plenty of articles based on which we can discuss about the history of BRICS, what the BRICS grouping has achieved, what is its main objective, and what about the proposed expansion of BRICS. See, right now the BRICS grouping includes only 5 emerging economies, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. There is a proposal to expand BRICS to make it the BRICS Plus. Several countries like UAE, Saudi Arabia, and others, they have shown interest to join BRICS as a member, as a full-time member. So there are a lot of topics to cover here. It's an important development. So I'm just giving you an update regarding the upcoming 15th BRICS Summit, which will be held from 22nd to 24th August at Johannesburg in South Africa. So let's wait for the updates. Let's wait for a few more articles to come. And next week, we'll have a detailed discussion on the BRICS grouping. Next, a small article on page number 12. It refers to Russian planes, military planes being spotted near Japan's coast. According to reports from the Japanese government and Japanese self-defense forces, Russian military planes were spotted near the Tsushima Strait. So I feel this location can be important for your map-based questions in your prelims. So let me show you where the Tsushima Strait is located. Please look at the map. This is where Tsushima Strait is located between Japan and the Korean Peninsula. Essentially, it's between South Korea and Japan. It connects the Sea of Japan with East China Sea and Yellow Sea. It is seen as part of the Korea Strait. Is that clear? It's this opening, it's a narrow water channel between South Korea and Japan that connects East China Sea and the Sea of Japan. And you have Yellow Sea over here next to the Korean Peninsula. So repeatedly, Russian military vessels and aircraft have made a presence here. Recently, there were Russian naval ships from the Baltic Fleet which tried entering the Tsushima Strait. Please note, Russia, Japan, they even have a maritime boundary dispute and a territorial island dispute over the Kuril Islands. To the north of Japan, you have the Kuril Islands, which is disputed between Russia and Japan. Russia has control over it, but Japan claims Kuril Islands. So recently, Russian military aircraft were spotted and Japanese self-defense air force scrambled its fighter jets to intercept the Russian planes. So please note where the Tsushima Strait is located. The location is relevant for a map-based question. Now the last article on page 12, we have a small article that refers to a country known as Haiti. The UN has released a report regarding the current situation in Haiti. And according to the report, more than 2,400 people have been killed in this small island country because of large-scale gang violence which has gripped this country. So you should know where this country is located. It's a Caribbean country located in the Caribbean region. You can see Cuba over here. This is Cuba. You can see the United States, the Gulf of Mexico and Florida over here. You can see Central America, right? This is Mexico, and then you see Central America here, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, and other Central American countries. And you also see South America or Latin America with Colombia, then Venezuela, etc. Now this region here is the Caribbean region, right? It's part of the Atlantic. So here you have various island nations that are part of the West Indies. You have Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, right? Kingston. There are various small islands that are part of the West Indies, right? So between Cuba and the West Indies, you have this small country called Haiti. Haiti is often in news because it has been hit by many disasters in the past, like massive earthquakes. It's very vulnerable to the impact of hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico. Along with these natural disasters, the political system here has collapsed. Essentially, there is like a civil war situation. There is massive political violence and gang violence, where there is looting, robberies, groups targeting each other, committing mob violence and lynchings. And as a result of this instability, thousands of people are getting killed in this small country. So the United Nations has observed the scale of violence has increased drastically. And this is of concern for India as well because we pay a lot of attention to the Caribbean region. In the Caribbean, particularly in the West Indies region, we have a very strong Indian community. So India does pay a lot of attention to the region, and any such instability here could affect the other island countries and could affect Indian interests as well. So please know where the country is located. The location might be important for a map-based question. So this completes my detailed discussion of today's The Hindu Newspaper. I feel you don't have to go back and read the newspaper after watching the session. In fact, that is the whole purpose of the analysis, right? To help you cover all these articles comprehensively so that you don't have to waste your time again reading the newspaper. I hope you guys have liked the session. Please take up the mains practice questions. Write the answers and post the answers in the answer writing portal, for which link is provided in the description box below. Also head to our Telegram channel because we have a quiz after the session on some of these topics. It will help you revise these articles again. So I hope you guys liked it. Do let me know how it went in your comments. And of course, please press the like button as well. So that is it for now. I'll meet you tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a good day.